So here we are. This is CNIT 152, Incident Response. This is the second class, so I'm just going to talk about Chapter 2, and then we'll demonstrate some more Splunk, which is what we're starting with here. And you should be taking quizzes and putting in discussions in the Canvas. And if you want to add the course, just make a request in the City College system and I'll approve it. And the most important thing to know if you're new is use samsclass.info. This URL is where everything starts for my classes. Don't expect stuff to be in the City College Canvas. I'm not using it. If you go to the page for the class, 152, you'll find the Canvas I'm using here in the quizzes section. So it's a different Canvas server, one where I have more control so I can get things done right instead of being stuck with the things the City College administrators do to me. So let's take a look at the slides here. This is really 152. Slides are left over from an earlier version of this class. All right, so a computer security incident is when something serious goes wrong where you're going to mobilize incident response. So some person does something bad that violates your security policy, things like leaking personal data out, stealing money, extorting people, getting to computing resources they shouldn't get to, malware, illegal materials. These are all things that you clearly need to respond to. So the goal, you investigate and then remediate. You investigate to figure out what's happening, how did they get in, what malware and tools did they use, what's affected, what did they accomplish, are they still in there, and find the time frame. And then after you got that all put together, you decide to have a remediation event where you suddenly fix all the problems at once. You change your firewall settings or something so they can't get in again. You re-image all the machines. You change the passwords or freeze all the accounts they've been using. You clean off all the malware, that sort of thing. And hopefully you kick them out and they can't get back in. As I mentioned before, in practice, it often fails, and you have to have another remediation event. All right. So there's an incident response team, and there's a lot of people involved in an incident response team. There's the core team, and they need to have participation from legal and compliance because you need to know what your legal requirements are, and you need to have lawyers look over your public statements and such. As you tell people, we got hacked and this happened and this happened, you have to make careful statements to avoid making things worse for your company. You have compliance regulations. If you're in a regulated industry like a bank or a power company, then there are legal requirements for you to maintain certain security standards, and you will have to explain what you've done and how it fits into your compliance. You've got to consider HR. As I mentioned before, when the college had a fake security incident put up by our crooked CTO, the internal college staff didn't know if it was safe to use the machines. That's something people will ask. How is it going to affect your own people that you've been hacked? They will want to know. And of course, your network infrastructure team will have to be involved in doing things like putting on patches, setting up new VLANs, moving to two-factor authentication, all of which are common things you have to do. And it'll affect the business, and your IT support people will have to be involved. They're going to have to help everybody with the password resets and the new versions of things you put in and new security procedures and all that. So, it's not like you just have one team doing something. You've got to have all these branches of business brought in, informed, and guided through the process, very much like change management. And that way you can minimize the harm to the company and guide people through where they need to go. So you have an incident manager that leads the team, and this person has to be able to get resources allocated. So they have to be able to be close to the head of the company. They have to be important enough to have influence on the head of the company. Say, we really need to shut down the servers. You really need to tell the customers that we're going down for a day, something like that. We have to have enough authority in the company that they will believe that. Whereas some lower IT person saying that will say, I'm not going to do that. That will mess up the business. You have to have enough trust to be able to demand expensive things. Then you've got a team leader from the IT staff. This will be evaluating the sensitivity of the data and what changes have to be made. That's for remediation. And then a lot of other teams, legal counsel, compliance officers, IT support, network infrastructure, your business, public relations, human resource, all these people are involved. You may have to make a public statement to the world at large, because if you're important, like you're a major utility, then if you have a security incident, it doesn't just affect your staff and your government oversight, but all the people out in the town want to know what happened and is this going to affect them. And you'll have to have public relations statements explaining that. And of course, the goal of an IR team is to try to minimize the harm to the company and smoothly get through this. So PCI DSS is one compliance agency. It is a industry self-regulation. It is not a government agency, but it is a consortium of credit card makers, and you have to conform to PCI DSS or you cannot process credit card transactions. However, they are notoriously lax in letting people through without in fact meeting the compliance requirements. And the other thing about them is they will impose processes and standards on you that might not really get along with your company. So this is an issue to be aware of. Your compliance agencies may have their own requirements. This happened to the college. Some unknown force outside the college about 10 years ago decided they wanted to shut down the college for no apparent reason. The most popular theory was that somebody wanted to shut down the college and use the land to build something else like condos or something. But they decided to shut us down for not meeting accreditation, which is our compliance requirement. But they sent an accreditation team to inspect the college, which said things are fine. And then the leader of the team just crossed that out and said, no, shut them down immediately, with no explanation at all. And we spent years fighting that. And that's the kind of thing that can happen. These accreditation bodies can be outside your control and hostile and confusing to deal with. So how do you get IR people? Of course, what everybody always wants is experience, but you often can't get people experienced in this field. So you can consider the cost of this. You may consider outsourcing. Most small companies can't possibly maintain an IR team, just like they probably don't have a legal team. They probably don't have a forensic team. They expect if that happens, we will have to hire some consultants to do it. And that's what you do when you're a small business. At some point, you grow large enough that having your own staff do it is better. There are requirements for regulatory or certification agencies that may require you to have certain investigations. You want to find people, and you may have to outsource it because you don't have experienced people on staff. This is usually the case for small to medium business. They just have an IT staff that can keep their servers up. They don't have anybody that really knows much about security or investigation or instant response. So you find candidates. It'd be nice if you can get people that have already done it before, or from college programs that teach this, usually postgraduate. Almost all the advanced security classes here are basically what's taught elsewhere in master's and PhD programs, a bizarre situation you might want to be aware of. And so you try to get people that have experience in running investigations or computer forensics, network traffic analysis, and knowledge of whatever applications you use. If you use Oracle, you want somebody that knows Oracle and things like that. So your team members have to be analytical, good communicators, and be able to solve problems. That's why in all my management classes I always have people give oral reports and written reports. You have to get good at communicating. The number one thing that holds people back in IT in general, and in security especially, is they tend to have good hands-on technical skills, and they tend to not be able to communicate. And this really holds you back. You have to communicate to your team, you have to communicate to your boss, you have to communicate to supervisors. Ideally, you should be able to network at an event like B-Sides. You should be able to talk to people and explain to them what you're doing in a way that leaves them walking away thinking that you're competent and valuable, and maybe they should think of you next time they're forming a company or something. You have to learn how to do that. And most IT people are sort of, on the Asperger's spectrum. They want to just hide in their room and play with the machine and never see a person. And you have to work on that. Develop more communication skills, or you'll be limited. And then, of course, industry certifications. There's a lot of certifications out there, and some people just get a lot of... it's good to have... What everybody really wants is industry experience. If you're going into a more formal hiring position like the government or the military, they really like those certifications, and huge companies. So industry certifications like CCNA, Security Plus, Certified Ethical Hacker, all these things. A lot of people would like to see those. In fact, I know when I started working for the military as a consultant, there were some people I knew that couldn't get in because they didn't have certs. And so the military really likes those certs. And anyway, other people don't care, but the more formal businesses really do care. So let me check for comments here. Okay, good. And I'll go to the Cahoots. So this is CNET 152 2A. Oh, good. The Supreme Court is going to decide what? All right, it looks like it said they're going to decide by January 6th. Anyway, I don't know what that is. Anyway, oh, the Supreme Court has taken the case. That's what it means. Okay, of Trump's immunity. All right, so that could mean endless delay still. I'm feeling more and more like Trump is totally going to skate. He knows how to delay things in court until the end of time. I don't think he's going to be punished in any way for any of his activities, but we'll see. He will have to pay some money, maybe. Maybe not even that. But I hope I'm wrong. It would be nice if we were a nation of laws and laws applied to everybody, but no one has ever achieved that. The rich people always have ways to get special treatment to some extent, but there ought to be some crimes so vile that even rich people can't get away with them. Like Jeffrey Epstein was able to get away with being a rampant pedophile for about 20 years, but eventually he couldn't anymore. There was some limit to how much he could bribe people and get away with murder. So we'll see. Every society has some corruption, and these cases demonstrate how much corruption you have. Well, I'll give it a few more seconds. Quinoa. I learned how to pronounce that. Ah, and there you are, Kofif. There you go. Doesn't matter. Feel free. I don't think it's going to bother anybody. We have very few people face to face. It's good. All right. Go ahead. That's fine. Sure. All right. So which of these is not an incident? Yeah, this is an incident that was prevented. And by the way, I know a guy that gave guest lectures a few times, and he worked at one of the big hard drive makers, and he said he was the guy that would search people that were leaving the company to find where they had hidden a thumb drive or something full of company data. And he said, I've never failed to find it. Everybody tried to sneak confidential data out. So that's interesting. But anyway, this is something that was prevented from becoming a security incident. If they got the drive out, now you'd have a security incident. Now you have confidential data leaking. Now you have to go through all this response. All right, which of these is not a goal of IR? This was a big discussion at a Secret Service meeting I went to a while ago with the High-Tech Crime Investigators Association, which is the Secret Service, which you could all join too. They have very interesting meetings, and they were discussing this. They were saying, we're doing instant response. We don't really care who attacked us. There's no point. And the law enforcement people said, hey, we care. They said, well, maybe you guys care, but the rest of us is running a company. What am I going to do? I prove it's the Iranian. I prove it's the Chinese. What am I going to do with that? Even if I prove it's the guy on my own block, I can't do it. I just need to kick them out, put in better firewall settings or something, and stop the next guy from getting in. As far as cutting that guy down and prosecuting him, that's not really the business of the company. It's a waste of time. Anyway. All right, what's the most important ability of your incident manager? authority is the most important thing. They have to be able to get resources allocated, which typically goes with communication skills, but that's not really the main thing. The main thing is they have to be trusted by the top C-level executives who can make hard decisions, because they're going to have to embarrass the company like the lawyer. They're going to have to steer the company through a bad time when bad things are going to happen. All right, so which stakeholder may have other goals more important to them than your company? PCI DSS, and by the way, this is another reason why when you have crime inside a company, you typically do not prosecute, because if somebody in your company is like stealing money, then you can investigate, find out who they are, and then you can punish them, like fire them. But if you try to go to court and prosecute them, now there's a government involved and an enemy, other lawyers, and they do investigations, and they may find out other things you don't want to go out. So but once you involve an outside agency, they may mess with you in ways you don't want. Whereas just keeping it in the company as much as possible is usually the best move. Most people prefer to do that because, and your compliance agencies, unfortunately, are outside the company, and they may have other priorities. Like PCI might decide for some political reason to enforce some new difficult rule, and you're just stuck with that. And they might decide that they don't like your incident response even though you think it's good enough. It's a thing to be aware of. The external agencies don't really care much about your company. All right? Rouhani is the only one of those I know is a real name. The other people aren't going to get their points unless they come out of the closet. Unless they're real names, which I kind of doubt. Anyway, however, that's fine. All right. And we got time to move on to the next bit here. So, all right, the incident response process. There's three things you do. You have initial response to put out the fire and contain it. There's immediate short-term emergency. Then you have an investigation, which will take a while, and then a remediation event when you fix all the problems and kick all the bad guys out, or at least you do the best you can there. So first you got to assemble the team, review data that you can get at quickly. Don't start a long investigation of a whole hard drive. Find something like network traffic or something you can analyze quickly and determine what kind of incident do you have and what's the potential impact. I remember when I worked at a financial company, it was like 4 p.m. on a Friday when a customer called up and said, "Hey, I just got my check and it's the wrong amount." And the telephone person there was a woman I really liked. Her name was Marie. She was really smart, and she said, "Fax us a copy of that." So we did. So we can see he absolutely had the wrong amount. So we immediately stopped. The CEO of the company and the president of our department and me meet together. He said, "How bad is this?" He had me on the computer to figure out how much total money did we ship, how much damages do I need to call the Bank of America and get them to stay late and cancel all those checks, and have all the customers get $10 overdraft fees, and we're going to have to cover that, and they're all going to be mad. How bad is it? And we calculated, how much possible damages there were and decided it was okay. But anyway, that's what you do. You decide what happened here, how bad is it, how much harm is it going to do, and that gives us a clue what we need to do in the short run. So you interview people who reported the incident, gather the details. Somebody saw something, like an antivirus alert went off or something. Then you interview IT staff, business unit people, look at the logs, and gather from that some initial estimate of what happened here, how big is it, how much harm is it doing. And then you have an investigation. And what you're trying to do, you want to find out what happened, how it happened, possibly who was responsible, although usually all you care about is who in your company, what problems are there in your company that caused this. And it may be that somebody in your company made a mistake, and then that person needs to be retrained or replaced or something, or it might just be a technical problem, like your servers need their patches or something. So if you just re-image servers without doing an investigation first, you typically do not solve the problem. In fact, you make it worse. You just alert the bad guys that they've been caught, but you don't kick them out, so now they dig in deeper and do more damage. So you have your initial leads. then here's the basic incident response process. You now form some indicators of compromise. You have some data to start with, like you detect some malware. So then you find the signatures of that malware, things like files and MD5 hashes, network connections, and then you deploy them, which means you run a script to test machines on your network to see if they have those indicators of compromise. You identify systems of interest, then you analyze the machines that are compromised further to see if there are more malware on it, more clues of bad things, and then you find more IOCs, more indicators of compromise, and you go around this loop finding more and more and more indicators of compromise until hopefully you find all the malware and damage that's been going on, and you find all the infected machines, and then you can move on to remediation. So I say the number one thing people want to do is just jump into remediation without the facts, because you have an IT team that is not used to doing security incidents. They're used to just doing normal IT problems. Like a machine goes down, you just re-image the machine, replace the hardware, and keep going. That's their first response, is to just treat it like a normal IT problem. But if it's a security incident, then that's not so simple. All right, so your initial leads, you find out what's going on, and be aware, as I mentioned before, that you don't need to use malware to do harm. That's the old-fashioned way, to install rootkits and botnets, but you can just use standard system administration tools that are not malicious and do everything you need with that. Like, for one thing, WMIC was quite useful for that, but there's a lot of other tools. So you find leads that are relevant to the incident with some detailed information and something actionable. So you try to find evidence you can use quickly at the beginning to get a start. Your incident compromise things like directory and file names, login events. You find an event log, persistent mechanism like registry run keys that will automatically relaunch programs, network traffic clues like IP addresses and domain names, or network protocol signatures. These are all useful indicators of compromise, things you can pretty easily detect and answer, is this machine part of the attack or not? And there's some standards to try to make formats for these indicators of compromise by various types. I don't think any of them have really won as a standard yet. Probably Yara is the most common one. Yara is basically grep for indicators of compromise. It's a really simple tool. It just looks for plain text patterns in a file. People make a big deal out of Yara. It doesn't seem to do anything that grep doesn't, as far as I can tell. But anyway, it just searches files for strings that you put in there. And so here's an example, IOC, and I think the Mandiant format. Anyway, so here, the sample IOC that will hit a number of artifacts present on a Windows machine. So it's got an XML format. You have an indicator item with this ID. This looks like a GUID, kernel32.dil. So this is just a file item full path, kernel32.dil, win.ini. Here's an event, file extension EVT. Those are event logs, and explorer.exe. These are just things you'll find on a Windows machine. These are not clues, indicators of compromise. They're just standard files. They're just showing you the one possible way you'd make it. Some kind of machine-readable format to read into something is the idea. So you can use automated IR platforms. They are out there. And once you have IOCs, then you typically do send out an automated process to scan all your machines. And we'll use Velociraptor later that makes this easy, but you can also just write a script in a language like Visual Basic or whatever language is present in your environment, which I don't think would be Visual Basic anymore on Windows machines, more likely PowerShell. Visual Basic is the older language, not used that much anymore. And if you have it, Python would be nice, but you write some kind of script that can run on the machines that will tell you whether these things are on there or not. And all right. And we're going to use Velociraptor as the main tool for that, which is very powerful. It makes it very easy. For network signatures, snort rules are the standard. That's a standard way to write them down. Snort rules are just a way to write down a description of network traffic. It looks like a regular expression. They're pretty hard to read, but they are the standard. All right, like I say, there's 3 formats for incident indicators of compromise. That should be IOC. But as I say, there isn't a clear industry leader yet. All right, so after you deploy the IOCs, you find hits. These are machines that do have the indicators of compromise, and therefore, now you should examine that machine and see if it's really infected, or is it that your indicators of compromise are not very good, and sometimes they trigger on clean machines, which can certainly happen. That would be a false positive. So you validate it, make sure it looks okay, then you categorize it. give it meaning categories like backdoor, access with valid credentials, or so on, and then prioritize them. And the most important machines to investigate are ones that give you more information to find more indicators of compromise in the initial stages. And let me just check to see if there's questions in the Twitch. Good. There's some names there to record. Are the slides you're using differently than those? No, they shouldn't be. No. For any one of these, they should be identical or close to it. Good. All right, so here's your goals. You want to preserve evidence, minimize your changes, create appropriate documentation. Typically, in instant response, you do live response. You just run a script on a running machine, collect the evidence. So it is not a very perfect process. You are, in fact, modifying the machine to some extent, collecting evidence. But you typically do not do the old-fashioned forensic where you image the whole hard drive and the whole RAM. Usually you don't want either of those things. You just want a simple thing like list of running processes, list of files with hashes, and things like that. The most common method is live response. You just run an automated tool, which we're going to do with Velociraptor later. And there's even some standard things you do. Just give me the usual stuff about that machine, which is a list of all the files and folders, a list of all the user accounts, a list of all the running processes and network connections. That's the kind of thing you gather. And that gives you a reasonable, not overwhelming amount of data that's usually enough to decide if it's compromised. All right. And you can collect memory. You can collect the entire RAM, but then you have a problem sort of like when you collect the entire hard drive. That itself is sort of hard to analyze, but it is an option. And of course, everything running on the machine is in memory. And a forensic disk image is the old-fashioned standard criminal investigation image where you image the whole hard drive, you make a big file, you analyze it with a tool like NCASE or FTK. If you're taking the forensics class, we're using an open source tool there which imitates those. And anyway, the point is you can spend a week getting through a disk drive. It's got all this stuff on there. And usually you don't want to do all that, but if you have a machine that's really of high value, you might want to do that old-fashioned thorough investigation, everything that's been going on in this one machine. But typically, you have too many machines and not enough time to do that for very many of them. And then you might want to analyze malware. If there's a new piece of malware that's not already been analyzed by somebody, you might have to analyze it to see what harm it does, what files it drops. You can do live response, as you said, analysis of what you're getting by running a script on the machine. And forensic examination on a disk image, you have to limit your goals. You could wander through somebody's files for a week, but you probably just want to get answers to specific questions, like what did they do on this date? Did they send any emails about this topic? That sort of thing. If you don't limit the scope of your inquiry, you'll waste a lot of time. All right, and then remediation. Like I say, you keep investigating until you're not finding anything new. Then you say, well, I found everything. This is something I came across when I did a lot of physics in grad school. There are a lot of physics scientific procedures that are not exact, and they cannot get an exact solution. So what you do is you make an approximate solution, and then you have a way to improve it, and you keep running the improvement until it stops changing. You call this a steady state. It's not really necessarily the complete solution, but it's clear that further effort, you're wasting my time. This is not improving it anymore. That's what you settle for when you're doing something where you cannot have a perfect solution. So you investigate, and when you're not finding anything new, you quit, because either you found it all, or if you haven't, you're not going to find any more. So it's time to quit. And so you start planning remediation early and carefully coordinate the threat removal. So you will try to figure out root causes of how they got in, how to plug them, and make one event that will fix all these things at once. That's the goal. So let's try another Kahoot. All right, here they are. 152, Chapter 2B. Mango Mussolini, that's a good one. That is our problem. Had a friend who lived through World War II, and he said we shouldn't compare Trump to Hitler. He said he's much more like Mussolini, which I think is correct. Because Hitler had a plan and logical goals and stuff. Mussolini was just sort of an egomaniac. Like I think Berlusconi was the same. Just this spoiled rich guy, just taking everything without really much of a long-term plan or thinking or anything. Just basically the entitled rich person that I should be able to do everything I want and nobody should ever get in my way. What's that? Don't think it's going to what?
I don't think Trump will.
Oh, no, I think he'll lose and then he'll demand to get in anyway. Like he did last time. But I don't know. Biden is screwing up pretty badly. But yeah, it doesn't seem like Trump has won a lot of new people over. But there's third parties that might drain enough to give it to Trump. Like RFK Jr. He got 20% in New Hampshire. If he was to suck 20% away from Biden, then Trump would win easily. Anyway, all right, let's give it a shot. All right, so which phase includes re-imaging the compromised servers? That's of course remediation. That's when you're performing your event to restore back to normal operations and hopefully kick the bad guys out. All right, which phase includes forensic analysis of disk images? Investigation, of course. All right. All right. Which phase includes interviewing the person who reported the incident? That's the initial response. In the early days, you're just trying to find out what's going on. Like somebody will complain, like I can't get my email. And then the first thing you do is investigate to find out how big is this problem. You know, is the server down? Is the whole network down? Is it just this one workstation? What's going on here? All right, and what phase includes deploying IOCs? That's investigation. You find some indicators of compromise and you deploy them by running a process to see which machines have these indicators of compromise. And then you investigate those machines further to find more indicators of compromise. All right. Well, we got one more section here, and I guess we can just keep going. All right, so there's posturing activities just to improve your security posture so you're more ready for things. And then there's tactical and strategic activities you go through. So posturing are things that just prepare you to be more ready to deal with security incidents, like you establish who's in charge, your contact information, who's responsible for what. That's why one thing that's very popular at conventions is they have companies run tabletop exercises where they just have members of various teams just get in a room and then talk about it. So suppose you, and then what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And you practice talking to each other. And this turns out to be a big deal. The number one problem when you have an attack is there's chaos. There's people running around undoing each other's work, forgetting something, assuming that somebody else is taking care of something when they aren't, and all that stuff. It's coordinating the people that often is the most difficult part. So then there's tactics, which are specific actions to deal with the current incidents, things like changing passwords, blocking IP addresses, making announcements, changing your business process, these sort of things. These are things you might do to deal with the current problem. And strategic are your long-term improvements to make sure this doesn't happen again, and nothing like it. So one of the most common ones is switching to two-factor authentication, because typically most attacks involve phishing or passwords. And Google, for example, about 5 years ago, I think Google announced that they may switch to 100% two-factor authentication with USB security keys for the whole company. And they said after that, we had zero phishing. And that's really effective. It's very expensive to do, very inconvenient for your employees, but after you bite the bullet and do it, now it's really hard for anybody to get in anymore. So that's something a lot of companies want to do, but they typically, when they do it, they don't do it thoroughly. For example, Microsoft just got hacked last month, and they said, well, we had an old server with high privileges just sitting around without two-factor on it, and a guessable password, and a password that had already been leaked in a previous breach. And they're like, yeah, you can trust us with your military and company data. Sure, we're like one of the top 3 companies. And they say, well, that's the problem. Security is really hard. How do you know there isn't one thing you forgot that's just sitting there left over from 10 years ago, unpatched? It's like, how do you know one of your employees is not a crook or drunk or something? There's going to be a weak spot somewhere. It's real hard to avoid it.
But for the key, you need the USB, right?
Yeah. Well, now they have Bluetooth too, Bluetooth enabled.
But if you lose that, then
Then you have to have some process to recover it if you lose it. So there'll be some way to go to the IT help desk and get another copy or something. Yeah, that's right. That's always a big issue. Every security measure, first the thing it does is lock out your own users. And then you have an endless chain of complaints and requests as they lose it. People will show up without their physical keys or their badges, and they will forget their passwords. So every security measure has a cost as you have to deal with all those problems. And very often, the recovery process is insecure, and the bad guys figure it out. So one trick they had a few years ago was you could call Yahoo, and if you knew somebody's home address, they would tell you their social security number. And if you had another company, if you knew their social security number, they would tell you like your password or something. There's a way to call like 3 different help desks and piece together enough information to get in. It's a problem. This is how Sarah Palin's email got hacked. She used Yahoo email for official government business, which is a mistake, and her Yahoo email had a recovery passphrase where all you had to do was say the town where you met your husband. So they just looked online and found out what town she grew up in, went to high school. That was the right answer. So like a teenager got in her email account, started sending out fake emails from her. It's that part where you recover the lost credential is often the weak spot. Anyway, so you have to track your information, and you have to have a depository of data where you give your incident a number or something, and you keep track of it and share it with your leadership, and you keep a log so you can guide future security incidents. There was a similar one like this. What did we do last time? So you're going to store the evidence you collected, the affected system, files of interest, what data was accessed or stolen, and then the attacker's activity, the indicators of compromise, compromised accounts, list of your tasks. This is your security log, and it helps a lot to look at how previous incidents were handled at your company, because, of course, very often the current problem was caused by insufficiently responding to the previous one. These are the same guys coming back because you didn't really kick them out well enough, and that's the way it is. So then you have reports. You have to report to your management, and you may have to report to overseeing agencies and compliance agencies and all that too. So that's why I say communicating in orally and in writing is important. I was embarrassed when I was new in a financial company because I wrote like a joke on a piece of paper. I said, I tried this OFUI, and he said, what's that? And he said, this is going to go to court. You can't be writing unprofessional things like that. I said, well, I didn't know that. Now I know. That's the thing. All right, so 2C. Incident causer, there you go. There's a t-shirt people wear at DEF CON, I void warranties, the hardware hackers. And if you turn off the S mode on your Windows machine, they have a scary warning like that. Sort of like you're voiding your warranty, you can't go back, this machine may be compromised, which is, you could say that. Yeah, now you could be installing malware. Probably if you left S mode on, it'd be really hard to infect it with malware, which is the point. So they're not wrong. If you can tolerate having S mode on, you probably will be less likely to get infected with malware, but it blocks all kinds of other activities too. Remember when I jailbroke my iPhone, my iPad, and started putting stuff on it, I was horrified when I discovered that Apple Restore, iTunes Restore, does not take it back to its original state. If you jailbroke it and installed stuff, it's still there. It doesn't restore the whole drive. It just restores the folders that they think you should be messing with. That's why they tell you, if you jailbreak an iPhone, they say, they turn your picture while they want to help you, say, get lost, don't try, ask Apple for help. From our point of view, you're off the reservation, there's no way home. And that's true. You've modified that machine in a way that the Apple procedures will not restore it back. Anyway, it was educational. All right, what's the fastest, easiest, and most common way to collect evidence? Live response. You run a collection script on the running system, you get a quick answer. That's usually what you want. These other things are for detailed, in-depth analysis and not usually appropriate for incident response. All right, what remediation phase would include changing passwords? All right, I guess you can think of it as tactical. You could think of it as strategic. Yeah, changing passwords is probably just tactical to stop the current incident. Switching to a better password system like two-factor would probably be strategic. All right, anyway. All right. All right, how about designating responsibilities? When would you do that? That's posturing, getting ready. All right. All right. And who should not receive periodic reports? Yeah, this is obvious. Like I say, it's in my mind because it happened here. The crooked CTO staged a fake virus outbreak and then didn't tell anybody anything, went straight to the Chronicle. So the headline was, City College is full of viruses infected, and all of us are freaking out. What? Nobody told the IT staff, nobody told and people were calling the college saying, should I come to work? Is it okay to use my machine? What do I need to do? And nobody knew anything. People were calling me, and I'm like, I'm just a teacher. I don't know anything. This is totally what you do not do. You talk inside your company and find out what's going on, and then you issue a careful press release saying what you need to tell the world after you know what you're doing. You don't go straight to some public exposure. That's crazy. That's causing the thing you're there to prevent. The purpose of the IR team is to avoid humiliating the company on the front page of the Chronicle, if possible. You would like to have a much more orderly, professional response to things that makes people trust you. Like, we had a problem, we fixed it, and here's the informative brochure. Something like that. All right. Incident causer, okay. All right, and there's honey, once, twice, good. All right, so I'm going to step away a few minutes. I'll be back. Then I'm going to look through the comments and Twitch and see what names I have. I saw at least a few people put names there. All right, so it's 1:55. We'll resume at 2:05. I'll just demonstrate the next Splunk project. That's the only thing on my agenda. Let me stop this recording.